This is An Infinite Path, spoken word essays by Niles Heckman, some of which go on to become our documentary short subject films, half of which release freely here through the podcast, all of which can be found through your support at nilesheckman.com. In what seems like a rather non-ominous title, mixed with a, well, here we go title, Gender and Sexuality Balance, we are going to state some things here, specifically one main concept, which may make small minds absolutely steam with anger. We are also going to make a room-splitting statement of truth in the later half of this one that will sure make these same minds absolutely boil. As always, if you are a stark dogmatist, do not proceed any further. We live in the material binary realm. From a material scientific perspective, this is from atoms and molecules. Binary meaning relating to, composed of, or involving two things. Within this natural dynamic of the material world, we have poles and opposites, the primary examples of this being night and day, and continuing examples being cold and hot, positive and negative electric poles, and what might be the most obvious example, the two genders of female and male. Yet we come from unity, oneness. We can think of this as the unified mind, the collective of all things, highest genius, non-duality, highest aspect of the human soul, white light void of unity consciousness, the divine, etc., which is pure light, pure love, pure energy at infinity. This is what all timeless ancient practices of philosophic, spiritual, highest level thought have always realized and communicated in their teachings. In Hebrew, it is called yeshida. It is non-physical, non-corporeal, meaning not having a body. From the most pedestrian standpoint, it can also said to be the white light one transmutes into in a near-death experience. For who can say for sure what happens when one dies, but we suspect that it is a full sensory experience of melting into this pure overexposed light and a leaving of one's physical vessel which can no longer function, rejoining that highest frequency and thus non-material light. You are a drop rejoining the ocean. So we have two things, two poles, two opposites with a spectrum in between. Carry this idea down into a list of how nature is structured, which alchemically can be derived further by a trinity of sulfur, mercury, and salt, then down into earth, air, fire, and water. So shall we say, from a spiritual perspective, 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 3, and 3 becomes 4 to make up the basic building blocks of nature. If you want more detail on said dynamic, give a read, perhaps followed by years of study, to a book, The Golden Chain of Homer, also called Aurea Catena Homeri, which was originally written in German by Anton Joseph Kirchwitscher. First printed in the early 1700s, it very well may be one of the most important books ever written which gives insights into how the world was made alchemically, with the idea that all creation, no matter what its nature, is closely interconnected from one secret correlation. There is a much deeper story about what the one thing really is and why it created a material subdivision. But we could call it the creator, the divine, God, or in reference to our previous essay, the flying spaghetti monster. The book would be a good source for diving deeper into this concept, so we recommend doing so. But for this light brushover of this concept, it is important to know that when things subdivide and subdivide again, they still contain both aspects of the previous subdivision. It is not all or nothing. For example, a woman is a female externally, but a male internally, and a man is a male externally, but a female internally, both with various degrees on a scale, where a tiny, frail woman can have aspects of being macho in their personality, and a big male bodybuilder can be very gentle in his personality. Everything in the binary material has a scale of degree, and it's actually not possible to have perfect balance, although the best example of balance in the material realm is what nature shows us. For nature has near, but not perfect, balance, which translates to longevity as nature has lasted eons, meaning millions and millions of years. But nature is still evolving, becoming more and more perfect, yet can only be absolutely perfect when returning to complete unity. So certain dynamics here will graduate away from the material, back to the spiritual, the only place where this can be achieved. So to recap, there is no binary in unity, but instead complete unity. Conversely, there is no complete unity or perfect balance in binary. So why in the heck, man, do we mention this now in round 3 of our pro-democracy political philosophy series? And here goes the dogmatic heads exploding part. Because a supreme being in complete unity outside of binary cannot be exclusively a male. God does not have a penis. No supreme being, which is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent, has solely a pair of testicles with no ovaries. It has instead evolved to the point of achieving complete unity in all things, including the feminine and masculine. It has evolved into becoming non-binary. Hardy har har. So whenever we hear the word he as referring to God, which likely happens millions of times a day in the realm of Earth, those doing so get the celestial red buzzer of incorrectness. To be fair, and in never-ending attempts to seek more balance, on the other side of this coin, it is also not fully accurate to say Mother Nature. For nature is not inherently only feminine. Peyote taught us this one, for our peyote experience was very nature-based in the masculine. At this point, it's important to state that the words man and he in older language typically refer to both sexes, with the Webster's 1828 definition of man being mankind, the human race, the whole species of human beings. And in Genesis 1:26 of the Bible, it says, "And God said, let us make man in our image." Man not meaning solely males, but females and males. So what is key to state here is that from the past, there was an inclusion of the female aspect of the species using language from multiple hundreds of years ago, all the way back to multiple thousands of years ago when the Bible was written, which may not have necessarily seemed the case. Yet outside of that, there has been centuries of off-balance giving to the masculine, the male side of the gender, more importance within traditional systems, which is bollocks. Fast forward to the blood spilling of the Crusades all the way to today, most religiously affiliated folks, even the more lightly religiously affiliated ones that have more balance, actually think of God, or the FSM, as a male, not a female. Not what it really is, androgynous. Those who have been despiritualized, which is most of modern society and culture, can only have others' higher level experiences be most easily communicated to the largest groups of people via fables and myths literalized, i.e., things in these old religious books are claimed to have really happened. We will get into the cons of the religions of empire in due course, but one of them is to take what is really inside and claim it is outside. So a being which is supreme, without body, in such an expanded, higher level, or dare we say, risking sounding woo, higher dimensional state, which each and every one of us is a micro branch of, a node on its network, if you will, that can be accessed through the inside psychologically, is instead claimed to be a humanized, corporealized form, a big man in the sky. This is why in the stars over eons, constellations were made from the clusters of stars turned into large man-like characters. The astrotheology degraded by theology to corporealize, meaning give bodies to, what ancients thought of as their external gods up above. It's easier to try and understand what is such a spiritually expansive, non-languageable, psychedelic experience of divinity and reduce it or degrade it or simplify it or water it down by simply instead saying it's physical and corporeal, and then take that long-standing age-old recipe of inaccuracy and simplicity and then unfortunately carry it into only one aspect of the binary, which over time was more often than not only one of two poles, the male one. For example, the Christian Trinity is said to contain the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. What about the Mother, Daughter, and Holy Ghost? They are removing one half of the equation. So the young, keen mind who's not buying the indoctrination may already be able to tell they're being bullshitted. Jordan Peterson is a Canadian psychologist, professor, and author, who initially became famous for pushing back against a bill advocating compelled speech regarding gender pronouns within the Canadian university system that he was a part of. Compelled speech from either side of the binary political spectrum absolutely does have issues, but we will save this discussion for another time. Peterson has argued that there is an ongoing crisis of masculinity and a backlash against masculinity in which the masculine spirit is under assault due to modern cultural attempts to feminize men. Have one look at Korean boy bands and you'll 100% agree with them, as they look like plastic hybridized mannequins and you can't quite tell if they're guys or gals. Some of his work we very much agree with, including that men need strong masculine role models in their lives, but some we very much do not agree with. For we appreciate the masculine, and this is not meant to be exclusively a hit piece against the masculine, while only speaking positively of the feminine. Strong masculinity is important. We personally are a male and like being so, engaging in chopping wood, carrying water, creating man glitter, otherwise known as sawdust, at times in recent years have wanted to punch someone in the face, have wanted to use our sex organs way more often than any female we've gotten naked with has, occasionally do like accelerating our car very fast, And part of us very much sees the appeal in owning various stabbing and shooting weapons. We know someone who is a bit of a cowboy who, upon returning back home from a flight, his wife picks him up in front of the airport and brings a soft pouch with his weapons so that he can immediately then put them on. It's marked husband's weapons. In much of the United States, which has never matured beyond cowboy culture, it's standard procedure to have your Glock as part of your everyday carry. The feminine part of us thinks this is ridiculous and unnecessary. But an aspect of the masculine part of us sees the point and thinks, fair enough, they should have the freedom to do that in certain public areas. A strong male who is a protector and caretaker is important and not to be undervalued. But so is a strong female who is also a protector and caretaker, and what we are talking about always is balance, which is finding equal importance in each. Peterson happens to also have become quite heavily religious, which he and anyone else are more than welcome to be, but in doing so is increasingly part of a system where those who become more fundamentalist within said system disagree with obvious examples of patriarchy through past and present, where the king had higher control than the queen, and bloodlines of male heirs were encouraged over female ones, which still continues to this day by male dominance in the majority of the authoritarian world, and even still has reminiscence in the more democratic world, with it being commonplace to still shake a man's hand over a woman's hand, or mention a man first in speech before the woman, which has led to the statement, ladies first, as a modern-day counterweight. Patriarchy has certainly very much been the name of the game in both the political and business worlds for the last 100 years, but no one, not even the ultra-modern-day boiler rooms of Wall Street, are more patriarchal. What Peterson is absolutely deep in the team of, religion. For in the most extreme forms of religion, male dominance is the absolute way. This is being seen at the time we write this by the Afghan Taliban, who are declaring women unable to attend school or even have employment. In extreme sects of Mormonism, polygamy has always been a thing, in which a man can have multiple wives, increasing the value of the male because there's only one of them, and decreasing the value of the females because there's multiple of them. One can tell us there's no patriarchy when a woman can have multiple husbands, but not the other way around. Or in the extremes of the Muslim world, where a woman has to wear the hijab, but a man can wear almost anything they want, no matter how much skin is showing. Let's see a man in the 114-degree Middle East weather wearing a full body covering while his wife is walking around in a thong bathing suit with flip-flops. Show us that, along with not referencing God as he, and then there will be no religious patriarchy. And to be fair, since we often advocate for the shamanic, we have also spent time with a shamanic tribe which lean patriarchal, where only the men seem to be taking up the shamanic path, but not the tribe's women. Energetically, Western cultures tend to see the sun as male, which spreads hotness or the positive pole of polarity, being associated with the element of fire, while the moon spreads coolness or the negative pole of polarity, being associated with the element of water. And we know the moon has a relationship with ocean tides. My wife is an OB/GYN doctor, which encompasses the two specialties of obstetrics, covering pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum, and gynecology, covering the health of the female reproductive system, the vagina, ovaries, breasts, and all those wonderful things. She and I know in our marital schedule that it is guaranteed that she'll be doing at least one, if not multiple, baby deliveries on the full moon because it's so common, like an egg timer. Our daughter arrived on the full moon. The positive pole goes outward and the negative pole goes inward. Positive and negative not to be confused with their emotions, for positivity is not good while negativity is not bad. Same with growth, powered by the sun, and decay, powered by the moon, both of which have equal importance. Masculine energy is said to be more the mind, thinking, while feminine energy is said to be more the heart, feeling. Physically, men typically have more upper body strength in their chest and arms, while women typically have more internal body strength in their lower body, with men having larger and wider chests and shoulders, and women having wider, more curvy hips and butts, both of which are thought to be signs of beauty. One is certainly more designed to chop wood, while the other is more designed to birth children. This does not mean that a male is not a culinary rock star, or a woman can't crack skulls in battle while wearing warrior regalia 6 months pregnant. It also doesn't mean either has greater or lesser value, but complement themselves perfectly. Men tend to do things more externally, which materially does extend to being outside, as men evolve to be more hunters and gatherers, while the women evolve to be more childbearers staying with the little ones inside. Women's threshold for being cold is typically lower than men's, and the male's facial hair, as a tool for keeping the face warm in colder weather, is an obvious evolutionary example of such. Foraging for nuts and greens, or killing meat and bringing it back to the shelter to feed the woman so the woman can then feed the baby via the boob have equal importance. Women have concave sexual organs going inward. Men have convex sexual organs going outward. Without getting into the birds and the bees, we know they are designed to work together. In the binary material, both human genders, each containing their own sexual organs and plumbing, must combine to create another human, and hermaphrodism, meaning having dual sexual organs, only occurs in botany, plants, and most invertebrates on the outside. In these groups, hermaphrodism is a normal external condition, enabling a form of sexual reproduction in which either partner can act as the female or male, using their dual organs at the same time. But outside of various smaller cellular things like amoebas and viruses, lack the ability to undergo self-reproduction. In very rare circumstances, a mammal, including a human, can be born with dual sexual organs, but without the ability to self-replicate. Outside of androgyny in some species, it is not possible to do without one of each of the sexes. Not only should this be proof that a creator, which can self-replicate, must contain both sexes, it brings us to androgyny in mythology. The androgyne, from the Greek word goon, woman, and andros, man, is a creator that is half male and half female. In myth, such a creature is usually a god because it can only exist outside of the binary, and in terms of its sexual hardware is called a hermaphrodite, after Hermaphroditus, son of Hermes and Aphrodite, hermaphrodite. In religious parlance, androgyny is a much more comprehensive and abstract concept that is implied by the literal image of a creator simultaneously male and female in physical form. To say that God is androgynous actually differs from saying that God is an androgyne. But if we limit ourselves to the relatively narrow interpretation of the bisexual God, usually a creator, we are still dealing with a very broad and important religious concept. So we would encourage, if you are taken into occasional reading of religious texts, trying to find the minority amount that's the good stuff, to pay attention to gods referred to as androgynous. Now remember when we said that the god, /flying spaghetti monster, creates subdivisions, its divisions contain both aspects of the previous division? Also when we said that women are men on the inside and men are women on the outside? The internal sexuality becomes inverted when one is homosexual. And just like with religious beliefs or practice, this is a sliding scale. When one is heterosexual, being attracted to the opposite sex, their internal sexuality is mirrored back to front to back. When one is bisexual, their internal dynamics are more leveled out the same. When one is homosexual, but you wouldn't know it from their behavior or mannerisms, their internal sexuality has slightly flipped. When their sexuality is more externally predominant to the point where they begin to externalize their flipped pole exponent, their internal sexuality has become more amplified. Examples being where you see a gay woman externalize her male aspect, with a more butch-style masculinized lesbian who might look like a construction worker, or a feminized gay male with a lisp, both who prefer to somewhat cross-dress. This is also seen in a more extreme degree with drag queens, where they amplify their opposite sex dress to a very heavy degree. Within the more extreme sexuality component flip amplifications, this is where one is then transgender or transsexual, meaning their gender expression does not correlate with their sex assigned at birth, where they likely have always had feelings of being the opposite sex in an incorrect body. In the early stages of being trans, at whatever age, they are likely going through a sexual identity crisis, not being sure where they stand, meaning trying to figure out who and what they are, and then once moving past the denial stage into the acceptance stage of their underlying urges, further along become in the physical process of transitioning to the opposite sex through hormone treatments and or then gender reassignment surgery, which is a process that can not only be quite expensive but take years. So due to numerous circumstances, one being lack of resources, many trans people throughout the world, such as let's say a financially impoverished gay male who lives in the slum favelas of Rio de Janeiro, will spend the remainder of their life with breasts and a penis, being a tranny, which are never able to fully flip their inverted internal and external sexuality toward their preference during their lifetimes. Since we are on Team Democratic Love over Team Authoritarian Hate, we will caveat that it's important to be understanding, accepting, and supportive of others' struggles through life. Virtually every bisexual, lesbian, gay, and/or trans person deals with psychological difficulties in their lifetimes due to their composition of their internal and external gender and sexuality. And if they come from religious households, this struggle is even more amplified. But at the same time, there has been an attempt within the trans community, supported by the larger gay community, to allow certain people to label themselves as non-binary, which is simply not accurate in the binary material. We accept and understand that the gay community is always adding new language because we personally are also all about new language. At the time of this writing, the gay community's current labeling has expanded to LGBTQIA+, and will likely expand more into future years. But at the same time, it must do things accurately to fully educate and not undermine itself. For a variety of reasons, within culture and society, one being legal forms, for example, if someone claims they are something that they are not, that's called lying. This was seen by an attractive, very feminine, blonde woman with heavy makeup and a cross around her neck, a sigil of her faith, going into a sympathetic LGBTQIA organization's building to fill out paperwork with a camera crew. She then requested the paperwork label her as a man, which she obviously was not, which was her way of trying to highlight on camera what she perceived as ridiculous and what she would claim as a non-traditional or non-natural way of it all. While in extremely rare occurrences it is possible for a human being to be born with dual sexual organs, they will always have one intended primary external and internal sexual gender. Folks who claim that they are non-binary are simply in the subset of homosexuality, being transgenderism and transsexuality, undergoing some stage of their transition period. Wherever they are in their personal fashion or hormone treatments, and regardless of what other titles like pansexual, asexual, or intersex they are using. The claiming of they or them would be more accurately and truly described as female transitioning to male, or male transitioning to female, and would also help reduce confusion and lack of education around such issues, such as when someone who is born a woman with ovaries realizes they are gay and then trans, and then begins to adopt a male dress and a male haircut, then takes on male hormone treatments, then grows male facial hair, then decides before having their gender reassignment surgery they would like to have a child, then has artificial insemination through their soon-to-be removed vagina to their still remaining ovaries, then becomes what appears from all view on the outside a pregnant guy with a beard. If someone is opposing their internal sexuality, it tends to amplify extremes. So back to the gay drag queen. They are a Bible-thumping, homophobic hater on the inside. And yes, homophobic, Bible-thumping hate spewers are repressed gay drag queens on the inside. This is why the Bible Belt in the United States has, for year after year after year, by far been the highest viewer of gay pornography. Instead of openly accepting gay towns and cities, in which horny gay consenting adults, in the privacy of their own bedrooms, are free to go at it with each other without needing to masturbate to gay porn, and more power to them. So those who secretly would like to do that are instead repressing it. It's also why in the United States you see anti-gay, supposed Christian Republicans, who advocate for and attempt to pass legislation which limits the rights of gay people, even though they are secretly gay themselves. They are self-hating. Just as ultra-macho, pick-up, hook-up, and leave one-night stand chauvinism is off balance, my wife had a lesbian female patient who had a female partner. They were not the usual loving gay type, but the man-disliking gay type. When my wife asked some questions about the father, they were so off-balance offended against the masculine that they corrected her by saying, "You mean donor?" with a "how dare you mention the male aspect of our pregnancy" attitude. Not healthy. All of these things are issues of being off equilibrium. For as over-masculinity is off balance, over-femininity is also off balance. We will get into another component of the real and noble and good spiritual core of religion versus the religions of empire in the next essay, which is the love aspect over the hate aspect, both of which revolve around the feminine heart. But even though a classical talking point of more extreme religion is its claim that it's always under persecution, the truth is that bisexual and homosexual people have had a long history of discrimination from religion. Engaging in attacks against transgenderism, claiming heterosexuality is the only natural way, when actually in nature we find all forms of sexuality. Even in other mammals, such as bull cows or certain primates, if left alone without females, constantly start humping one another of the same sex. To give credit for less extreme modern aspects of religion, some conventional Abrahamic systems of faith have made much progress in this area in just our lifetimes. supporting democratic societies which allow for private practices of any type of sexuality amongst consenting adults and its surrounding education, because that includes everyone, not just a select group, while authoritarian, patriarchal societies disapprove of or disallow or punish anything that is not solely heterosexual, and usually a very repressed form of it. If your mind is a constantly expanding sponge of new information and you haven't turned this off in anger, we now approach the room splitter and dogmatic mind boiler. Just as not all gay men have a lisp in their voice, feminizing it on the outside, only gay men have a lisp. Not all religious people are against birth control and abortion, but only religious people are against birth control and abortion. Being anti-choice or anti-abortion or even anti-birth control has fuck all nothing to do with life. Pro-life is a lie, lie, lie. If anti-choice folks were really pro-life, they would care about the loss of species biodiversity, which they do not. If they were really pro-life, they would care about the lives of migrant refugee children dying in the Mexican desert on their way into Texas and Arizona, or drowning in the Mediterranean, which they do not. If they were really pro-life, they would care about the lives of animals being slaughtered in factory farms, which they do not. If they were really pro-life, they would care more about the lives of second graders than the Second Amendment, which they do not. If they were really pro-life, they would care about the lives of children being born into households where they are not wanted and unloved, which they do not. They are forced birth don't care about life because that removes the final decision from the woman and turns her back into a mandatory baby factory. Limiting women's access to abortion and contraception is about power and control. Specifically, patriarchal control over the divine feminine, full stop. This is because both birth control and abortion are tools which empower the feminine. The storefront marketing campaign against abortion claims to be advocates for the unborn, allowing for a faux quasi-highest morality stance while then hiding their actual not giving a shit about the acorns which they claim to be oak trees after they are born. So women who are crusaders against a woman's right to choose have been mind-controlled to be self-disempowering. Doing some research of what life was like for women prior to the advent of birth control, which is a preventative, and abortion, which is a much more difficult decision but an available option of choice, and you'll find it was staggeringly more difficult and disempowering for them. Women were basically considered second class, completely subservient to males, and sperm repositories who were only valued for their bodies and their ability to continue the population instead of for their leadership capabilities and infinite other possibilities. Strong women in democratic society control access to sex. In authoritarian past cultures like fascist Italy, women were pushed to have as many children as possible, oftentimes even by force. In more authoritarian cultures of today, male-to-female rape within marriage is still essentially legal. This is because all women can then do is stay at home and raise children, even from a very young age, and then have less say in their own plans for education, independence, travel, career, politics, and say outside of the household. This is why we are amazed when any woman is heavily religious, and it is why any woman who votes for authoritarianism is a contrary position, and can only occur because of a heavy indoctrination into systems of patriarchy. For the religions of empire have always disempowered the feminine. Not only do more free and democratic-leaning societies always allow for simple access to birth control and abortion, they are always more co-balanced on their gender importance, while those who are more pro-authoritarian are patriarchal. There is also evidence in the historical record that in higher consciousness ancient civilizations, before the religions of empire spread, that the patriarchy, those going outward from their society, were the decision makers, and the matriarchy, going inward from their society, were just as equally respected decision makers, and both had just as much say in terms of their tribe, culture, and society. But guess who were the final when all was said and done decision makers? The matriarchy, the wise female elders who often lived longer than the males. One piece of evidence carried down in culture and myth still to this day, which is proof of this, can be found in the ancient game of chess, where the queen is actually more fluid than the king. Not only being able to only move one square per move like the king, but instead the entire length of the board per move. That's power. So it's not surprising that educated, smart, strong, independent, and spiritually powerful women, who are each capable of one day becoming philosopher queens, don't like attempts at having their rights reduced.